Hello J Zoners. Today I want to make you a video to help illustrate the story of this Easter week. And I'm going to tell the story through these eggs. Now you'll also have been sent on email a little set of cards that when you print them out and cut them out end up obviously with little cards like this. So it would be great if you could print this out and cut them up, and that will help you follow the story because you don't have any of the eggs. So we'll start with the first one, which is the Palm Sunday story, and you'll see the first card says donkey. So if we open up our first egg, inside there is a donkey. And as we remember the story, Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey. Now, he could have ridden on a horse, but he didn't. He chose to ride on a donkey, which was a lowly animal that does hard work. And as we know, Jesus came to do the hard work of making us friends with God. Number 2 on our cards is the cup. Now, we've moved along in the story from the Palm Sunday to Thursday night. And this is the cup. And that's the story when Jesus goes up to the upper room with his disciples and they have a meal together. And that's where he breaks the bread and they drink out of a cup. And that's what that represents. Jesus was trying to make a point with his disciples, saying that this bread that we now break is going to be my body broken for you. And the cup that we drink is my blood. And the disciples didn't have a clue what Jesus was talking about. But we know what is going to come in the story of Jesus. And so it's a good reminder of what Jesus has done for us. The third one is the one that says coins. Now, during that supper, that Last Supper, one of the people present was Judas Iscariot. Now, Judas Iscariot was the treasurer or the keeper of the money for all the disciples for different things that they might need. And during that meal, he actually left and he went and he made a deal with the religious leaders where he said that he would hand Jesus over to them for a price. And that price was 30 pieces of silver. Now, I've only got 3, but we can imagine that these were 30 pieces of silver. So that was the betrayal. Jesus was being betrayed to the religious leaders by Judas. Our next one is the one that says praying, and it's got hands on it. Now, Jesus and his disciples, they go to a garden, and it's called the Garden of Gethsemane. And Jesus says, come and pray with me. And the disciples, they actually fall asleep. They can't keep their eyes open. It's the middle of the night. And Jesus comes back and says, can't you even stay awake for a little while? Stay awake and pray with me. And that was the point when Jesus was praying to his Father, saying, if this is your will, I am willing to go through with what you've asked me to do. And he actually said, yes, I'm willing to go. We better open up our 4th egg, and it is a set of praying hands. Our next one is a whip. Now, there was a custom of the time, of the day, that said one prisoner at this time of year, at this Passover time of the year, can go free. And Pilate says to the crowd, I'm giving you the choice. Who is it that you want to go free? I can present to you Jesus, and I present to you a guy called Barabbas. And they all said, we want Barabbas, we want Barabbas. And he says to the crowd, well, what will I do with Jesus? And the crowd yell out, crucify him. And so Pilate hands over Barabbas to the people so he can go free. But for poor Jesus, he gets flogged instead. And so we have a piece of leather here which represents like a whip that they probably used to whip Jesus with. Our next card is the crown. And so as they flog him and tease him and whip him, they also weave together some thorns into a crown and put it on his head, because they chant and say, "You say that you're the king, so we're going to make you a crown." But the crown was not a nice crown. It was a crown that would have cut into his head and caused even more pain. So our next one is the nails, which is also in the shape of a cross. So Jesus gets sentenced to death, and that sentence is to be carried out on a cross, which in the Roman days was actually quite a common way to die, but it was a very horrible way to die. Now that's a big version of a nail that may have been used. Now our next card is a dice. Now some of the soldiers and people around Jesus, because they were mocking him, saying, "If you really are a king, save yourself." And so after they had crucified him, they actually rolled a dice to, it says they rolled a dice and divided his garments up among themselves. Now our next card says spear. Now to be crucified is actually a very slow way to die. They didn't want anyone, the Jews didn't want anyone still on a cross during their Sabbath. And so what they would do, if the person hanging on the cross was still alive, they would come along and break their legs, which made them die more quickly. But with Jesus, when they came along to see whether he had died or not, he actually was already dead, which was a bit of a surprise to them. So instead of breaking his legs, they actually stabbed him in the side with a spear. And that's what our next symbol is. Our next card is linen. Now they wanted a man named Joseph of Arimathea came along and said, "Can I have the body of Jesus?" And so they actually said, "Yes, you can." So he took his body down and he wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, which is what our next egg holds, in a clean linen cloth, and he placed him in a tomb, which was like a cave, and that's where Jesus' body was placed. Our second last card is the stone. And the Romans were really afraid that something or someone, one of Jesus' friends, might come along and steal the body. And so they didn't just put the body in the tomb, they then rolled a big stone in front of the tomb and also placed a guard there to stop anyone coming along and stealing the body. So we've covered everything, or a lot of things, in the story from Palm Sunday all the way through to when Jesus is crucified. And so the crucifixion happened on a Friday, which we call Good Friday. Then on the Saturday, he's in the tomb all day. And then on Sunday morning, it says very early on Sunday morning, and this is our last one, some of the women went to the tomb to see if they could put spices and that sort of thing on bodies like they did, only to find that the stone had been rolled away already. And so that's what our last egg represents, is the tomb, and inside it there is nothing. Because as we know in the story, that the disciples, like I said, get to the tomb and they find the stone rolled away, and then one of them actually goes in and they see that the tomb is actually empty, and they realise that something has happened. And that's what we celebrate on Easter Sunday, is Jesus rising again. If we believe and trust in Jesus through all of this and really understand and take on for ourselves the meaning of this story, we realise that our sins can be forgiven because Jesus has paid the ultimate price for us. He walked this path and died a death that he did not deserve because he was actually innocent in all of this. And because of that, God said, I'm going to raise him to life again. He can be friends with God forever. So it's a long story and it's a hard story to understand, but I hope that you really do understand what the story of Easter is all about.